Welcome to another episode of So You Think You Can Doc. Today we're going to go back a little bit further into training. So today we have a medical school student with us.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Panickel.
So how are you feeling today?
Good. How are you?
Good. It's Friday. It's cold. It's Wisconsin, right? And it's going to be another one of those winters. I will try to point out to people, and maybe you feel this way, maybe you don't. In medical school or residency, this focus on where I'm going to go based on the weather is really a waste of time because you get into these things and you're in there and you're busy and you're doing this or doing that, and it's the people you meet and you're around are probably more important than whether it's warm out and what you're going to do at that city. And people start focusing on those cities so much, and I think they'll get more. It's really hard to do at a younger age, but they'll get more out of thinking like, oh, where do I want to go and what does that program offer and how's it going to get me there. It sounds like those are old people's things to think about. When you're at that stage, you're kind of thinking like, oh, I want to go here, I want to go there. That sounds like so much fun. So you ended up in Madison, but it's not where you started, right? So where'd you grow up?
I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin. It's called Burlington, Wisconsin.
Oh,
I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's
yeah,
the
I
home
have.
of Tony Romo. That's like our big claim.
Oh, Tony Romo. Man, I always pictured him as being like a California boy. I mean, he played for Dallas, but I
Mhm.
always pictured him as like a California boy. It's kind of like, everybody claims Aaron Rodgers, but he's a California boy. And, Tom Brady, oh, Mr. New England, but he's also a California boy. So, yeah, no, I didn't know that. Tony Romo. Okay, now that makes me hate him a little bit less. Okay, so Burlington's pretty small.
Yes, it's pretty small. I think it's around 10,000, which is like decently small, but not the smallest town in Wisconsin.
How far is Burlington from here?
It's like an hour and 35 minutes.
Which direction? Going
Like south.
like, but you're not
Southeast?
you're not hitting Illinois, so you're kind of like, okay, southeast, so that's like towards Waukesha.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's in Racine County.
okay. So how far would you be from Chicago?
It's like an hour 10 from the O'Hare Airport, so it's pretty nice for flying.
Yeah, that's something. You're kind of there, and then Milwaukee's right there, and then yeah, Madison. Almost everything's the same distance
Mhm.
from there. So that's not bad as far as, well. I think about some people in northern Wisconsin. They're 4 or 5 hours from any city of any size, really.
Yeah.
But you're kind of, it's small, but you're still surrounded by big cities. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So you went to high school there?
Mhm.
How big was the high school?
I think our class was like 260 or something.
Okay, so 260, about 1,000 plus people in the whole school.
Mm.
It's not obnoxiously small, I've heard of smaller. Yeah, and a lot of the bigger high schools you'll hear. My high school was like 4 or 5,000,
Oh.
people, and I think the graduating class was like 900 or something like that. It was a large attrition rate in the school. So you're there. You're in high school. We'll say, maybe we'll skip through, unless there's anything you want to talk about before that.
Not really.
It's usually our lives are, whatever they were, before that. Were there anything in particular that you were interested in, or that you were known for, or was kind of your brand, even at that young age, or even before high school?
My big thing in high school was singing. So I was in the a cappella choir and like school choir. I would do like these solo ensemble singing competitions. So that was kind of like my main thing in high school.
So was that like the Pitch Perfect influence?
Yeah.
Is that what it was? I actually really like those. Of course, they got crazy as the sequels, came out
Yeah.
after that. But yeah, no, it was yeah, making something. Well, that was about making something cool that may not have been cool, or, well, I don't know. In that movie, maybe it was cool already. I don't know. So you got into. Was this like you're a kid and you sing and your family encourages it, or was this like you were taking classes and all that kind of stuff?
It was kind of like in elementary school, like we had choir that we were all kind of required to be in.
Hmm.
And I think it kind of stemmed from that and just grew from my music teachers.
So primarily from your teachers, maybe recognizing that. I could imagine, yeah, elementary school and middle school, that they've got a lot of pain listening to kids. And then when they have less pain, they're like, wait a minute. But they obviously supported or encouraged you to pursue it in some way, or just kind of keep with it.
Yeah, I think kind of keep with it. I feel like there were a lot of avenues to do that. Like I mentioned, a cappella, the musicals I was involved in, show choir I did also in high school. So I was like in that scene. I also really liked playing tennis. I did that all 4 years of high school too. So those are kind of the main things.
Yeah. So tennis and I guess we'll say singing as a whole, because I think, saying choir is just kind of pigeoning to one thing more than anything else. But, so high school is also a point where, unfortunately, I see it in my own kids now. You have to already start picking your path and doing things to prepare for it, right?
Yeah.
At such an early age. Well, you're playing tennis and singing, and, obviously you're on a show that's called So You Think You Can Dock. So we know where this goes, right? And those things don't really line up necessarily all that well. Were there some other influences? Because I look at it now, even when you apply to colleges, you already have to pick a major.
Mhm.
That's already separating. So were you science focused already?
Kind of, but I think the actual influence is actually really specifically tied to high school. I had this teacher, my anatomy teacher, and when I was in his class, he did a lot of kind of exposing people to the medical field that, wouldn't have otherwise been. So he had a field trip where we went to Rosalind Franklin University Medical School, and we did like OSCEs in high school. So we were trying to think of a diagnosis kind of
Mm.
in teams. We got to see some of the cadaver lab and things like that, which was really cool. And then he also had a program in the high school where we were able to get our EMT certification in high school and then could volunteer as student EMTs while we were in class. So it was called BHS1. So basically we would like wear these neon sweatshirts. We'd carry a radio while in our high school classes.
Hmm.
And then if we got a call, we were partnered with someone and we would go meet the ambulance in the community and like be able to see the call.
So
So
this is really cool, right? So this one teacher is essentially, kind of created this program that's really exposing people. And I love the certificate, the ownership, the EMT, the identification, feeling special, different, or vested. But before you get to that, because this wasn't everyone in the school,
right.
right? It was a group of people. Maybe everybody has to take anatomy, but then there's a subgroup of people who, go on these trips or, and do all of these things and kind of buy into it. So you had to take anatomy.
It was an elective. It was an elective, like
Okay.
one of the science electives you could take. Yeah.
Okay. And did you just pick it because it fit your schedule, or was there already an inkling towards it?
I think there was already an inkling. I think I liked science. I think I was science minded, like you mentioned earlier. And I think medicine was something that I had thought about a little bit, but had only been introduced to the field more through that experience. So I think I kind of had that inclination prior to taking the class.
Why do you think you had the inclination? Did you have any family in medicine or anything like that?
No, I am not I'm not quite sure. I think I always really liked science. And yeah, I think I was drawn to the field because it was, taking care of people when they were sick. And I feel like
Mhm.
I played that role a lot when I was younger, was like taking care of my brother or like my parents when they were sick. I just really enjoyed that. And I think it combined that aspect of taking care of people and science, which I was probably my favorite subject in a sense, kind of like a rudimentary
So,
understanding of it.
and you mentioned your brother and, your parents when you're sick. Do you mean just like when they had a cold, or
Yeah.
was there
Like,
any particular? Okay. So yeah, so you noticed you didn't hate it, taking care of people, and even maybe drew you, into something like that you felt a reward from or felt value from maybe. Yeah. And I guess we kind of say it all the time and it's very lighthearted. It's like, oh, do what you love. I really like taking care of people, and it sounds really corny. And then you try to put it on a personal statement or something, and it
yeah.
sounds like, oh man, how do I say this and actually mean it?
Mm.
And some people actually mean it and they actually feel it. Right. And that's something that certainly holds for me. I can tell you my happy place is walking into clinic with patients and hearing their stories and figuring out how to help them. Most people do not like clinic. Okay. I'm well aware of that, but that's actually my place. And to put that in words in a way that sounds true, is really difficult sometimes because everybody just says it. Right. So you're already feeling like I like helping people more than, well, maybe not more than helping yourself, but certainly it doesn't bother you to do it. So you've already got this a bit of an inkling. You've got this exposure here where you're in high school, and yeah, man, that's great. I mean, I feel like that's what every high school needs is people like that, because if they're not there, it just doesn't exist. So I remember this was in college, but I was part of the volunteer ambulance, and that's what that reminded me of.
Yeah.
You got your jumpsuit, your whatever, and then you'd go put the wrong gas in the ambulance and regret it. I mean, he didn't really know what we were doing, but you were trying, right?
Yeah.
And you were a live body and you know how to follow instructions, right?
Mhm.
You can get EMT certified. It doesn't mean you're confidently
Yeah. Yeah.
and it doesn't mean your back is going to hold up either, right? So, all right. So you got this great exposure there, which kind of pulls you into, well, you didn't hate sciences and you started liking them more, it sounds like. But still doesn't put you in medicine. And again, the unfortunate reality is that people at such a young age now, if they're even getting to the point of like thinking about applying for college, they have to pick a major, right? Which
Mhm.
already puts you into something. Were you thinking about basic sciences or science research or anything like that at any point?
Yeah. In college, I majored in neurobiology and psychology just because I really liked psychology in high school as well, and I found that those majors kind of played well together, and I thought neurobiology was the most human-centered science that I
Mm-hmm.
could major in, so that's kind of what drew me there. And then I did research in 2 labs. The first one was a dermatology lab, and we were doing research on polyphenols like resveratrol and quercetin and seeing how those impacted different cancer pathways. So it was really cool because it was almost like diet focused, like natural polyphenols and how those things can impact like tumorigenesis. And I think I was interested in it because my mom, she had training in dietetics in India. She never finished and she didn't practice as one here, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the way that she thought about health was through diet. And she was really more focused on the natural aspects of medicine and wasn't really as much of a traditional Western medicine
Mm-hmm.
person. And so I think that research interest stemmed from, her showing me those kinds of things as a kid.
Right. So you're getting exposure to all these, well I'll just say naturopathic, but you get the point. It's a lot of the, I don't want to just kind of pigeonhole it into dietary things, but
Yeah.
I'm going to say it's more of the natural things that we don't necessarily understand. And what I always tell people who, patients will always ask you these things is that I can't tell you that works, but I'm not going to tell you it doesn't work
Right.
because just because we don't understand it and we don't have an FDA, approval for it for a certain indication, and it's been around for a million years, and people have been using it somewhere else, it probably has something to it. And
Hmm.
there are some people who have deficiencies will respond, and other people who don't have deficiencies and they just won't respond. Right? I think it's probably more important we identify potential harm and
Yes.
say this is not harmful for you.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, then this works, right? So you've already got kind of an inkling, you're coming home and you're talking about stuff, and then your mom like can weigh in on this and say, "Oh yeah, this," so there's a discussion that's kind of possibly bridging, from what you're hearing in school and also at home, right? Was dad in medicine? Oh,
No, no,
okay.
he's a computer engineer.
So computer engineer, that's more usually, right? Every personality can be different, depending on, where you are. You can be a computer engineer and still have like a medicine brain, right? But you're still, still working as a computer engineer. So did that have any appeal for you?
No, I don't think that's the way my brain works. It's funny because a lot of the people in my family are like software engineers.
Hmm.
So me going into medicine is definitely a different path from the rest of my family. They're more like that kind of minded.
Yeah. So my father's a doctor, my uncles are all doctors. And at one point, to steer on a different path, I said I was going to do computer science. Just, and obviously I gave up. But it was more of a, rebel thing. And then I worked as a chemist. It was a long story, but it's just interesting hearing that. So there you are, you've got all these influences around you. It sounds like, or maybe they don't hate it, um, but you're not following that path, and your mom is probably so happy about this. Anyway, it's like it's because it's closer to her. But so okay, now you're kind of steering a different direction, right? Because now you're okay. I like these sciences, but it's a pretty big leap to say, okay, well, I like the sciences. I'm not going to be a singer.
Yeah, I think that
That
was
that
always more
registered
recreational.
already? All right. And I'm not gonna be a professional tennis player? Okay.
Recreation.
Okay. All right. So those those weren't competing
Hmm.
at this point, right? And you're, let's say, junior year, right, in
Hmm.
high school, because this is where, it starts getting real, right? Junior year, what are you thinking?
I think at that point, I was definitely thinking about medicine. I had been doing like, I was scribing in the emergency department, so I was being able to see clinical practice and
Which emergency department?
St. Mary's emergency department.
You're kidding. Okay, so that's where my wife works.
Oh.
And she was just bragging about it's some ridiculous percentage of their scribes have gotten into medical school, like, locally or at UW. It's so
Mhm.
funny. This is like 3 days ago. She was just telling me about this. You probably worked with her actually.
Maybe, yeah.
So yeah, so you were scribing there. You obviously have an interest. When were you scribing? You were scribing
Junior and senior year.
in high
So
school. You
okay.
now have to apply like for a major. I'm assuming you went to the UW.
Yeah.
Okay, because you wouldn't have been scribing there. That's why. That's so good. But so, what major did you go into for UW at UW?
Neurobiology and psychology.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing a couple of high school students that are like actually applying for like neurobio, and from that point they're interested in already high school. I'm like, how do you even know what that is? Right? So you're there in, let's say, junior year. The neurobiology psychology part can kind of, I guess, take you down that route, meaning
Mhm.
like basic science in that route and researcher versus, I guess there's a lot of pathways beyond medical school, right?
Yeah.
But you're already scribing, which kind of tells you something, right? You're really interested, again, the patient aspect and care. Is that the way it was really going at that point?
Yeah, I was doing a big like, a variety of different things, like, patient-facing things, like, scribing was one aspect of it, and then I would also do health coaching, which was where we served as, like, motivational interviewers for patients. So that was a way I was able to directly talk to patients rather than just working on, like, the electronic health record. So
What do you mean by motivational interviewers?
yeah, so we basically got training in motivational interviewing, and then we worked at an access clinic where we would see patients and kind of characterize their goals, like their healthcare goals or personal goals in general, and then kind of work through the steps of, how can we achieve that goal in the way that's most realistic for you? And then we do like follow-up calls 2 weeks later and see how they were progressing with their goal. It was kind of like an initiative from the clinic to integrate that type of interviewing.
How did that come up?
I was in an org called Community Health Volunteers of Madison, like a student org, and
Mhm.
so that was a program as part of that organization that we could do that.
So you saw it as an option, and yeah, so a lot of people would look at that option and say, and kind of get stressed out by it, like, oh, I'm gonna like actually talk to people or whatever it is, and
Mhm.
I'm so young and they're probably so old and this, that, and the other. But you went to it, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a lot more important than maybe even you recognize. Because when you talk about this, like orienting patients towards goals, this is basically quality of life, I assume, goals versus your hemoglobin A1C
Yeah.
or something, right? So, and I do a lot of work with palliative care and our late stage CKD approaching dialysis. And for the older people, like, should you do dialysis? Should you not? And we're really shifting towards what are your goals in life? What are you trying to accomplish? Because maybe dialysis isn't the right path. And trying to incorporate that. And that's been really the big buzz is quality of life. And patients will come in telling you about it.
Mhm.
This is what they want. And that's essentially what you're doing because you're trying to figure out what their goals are and incorporating that into them. And then follow-up calls. I mean, it's really more impactful than maybe you realized or maybe you did realize because someone caring enough to call you back is
Yeah.
huge for a
Mhm.
patient. Like I'm sure you heard it when you called them, because they assumed you weren't going to call them. So that's really pretty cool. So how did that feel? Did that reinforce anything for you?
Definitely, yeah. I really valued those, like, patient care experiences that I was able to
Mhm.
have, so I knew I wanted something where I could follow patients over time and be able to have those relationships with them. It was extremely valuable, so I think it definitely pushed me towards, rather than a research way of
Mhm.
science, definitely more towards, like, healthcare and being able to talk to people.
So that is interesting in that so not all physicians desire a long-term relationship, right? So when we look at intensive care units, the emergency departments, hospitalists, those are all kind of set time relationships,
Yeah.
right? And you could argue not all surgeons, but for some surgery specialties, you're disconnected
Mhm.
from patients. You're doing procedures, right? Trauma, like unless they keep coming back from over and over.
Hopefully not, yeah.
But yeah, generally it's not a long-term relationship. So there's already something there, right? Where it's saying like, okay, I like not just meeting people and helping people, but also seeing them again. It may not sound like a big thing, but it's a thing, right? When
Mhm.
you think about what you're gonna do with your life, right? And you're not running away from that. I think about, yeah, my father's a pulmonary ICU, and his it was like, oh, when they're intubated, they don't talk. The families do anyway.
Yeah.
But it was like, so, but that's kind of not where you are. So I think yeah, you're already kind of molding yourself, if you will, right? So you're there, you're in your junior year ish here at Madison, and you're thinking medical school for sure.
I think at that point, I was definitely leaning towards it for sure. I was thinking about PA school potentially as well. But I think like with the research I was doing, I just wanted to I kind of wanted to just know as much as possible. And I think medical school felt right for me because I wanted to have the all the training I could basically. So I think at that point I was definitely leaning medical school,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, and there's a couple of, leaps, of course, before medical school. So here you are, you've got to take all these hard classes, right? Because of your major,
Mhm.
naturally. How was that going?
Yeah, it wasn't going amazingly. I think it was a big adjustment going from high school to college for me, and I didn't really have good study habits built in. So I think GPA-wise, I was nervous about medical school because it was kind of a rough start and then I gradually built it back up, but that was definitely a concern during college. Towards the end of college, I kind of figured it out, but it was a process.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, and that's
took
the problem. You
time.
dig a hole, right? It's
Yeah.
it's like trying to fix it. The same thing with high school. People start off and it's like, oh man, you got to get up there, and then of course there's like then there's standardized exams to like move forward and get into things as well.
Mhm.
So that's really, yeah, it's pretty tough. So you're doing better
Yeah.
with the grades. Things are coming up, but you're questioning whether or not basically you're going to get in, right? And then of course there's the MCAT that's going to, you know, play its own role there too. But you are doing the right things, meaning like you're doing the other things. You're working as a scribe, right?
Mhm.
These things are all lining you up. Now, you mentioned the PA or APP part of it, and it's there's a certain appeal to that. At
Yeah.
least from what I observe, in that if you don't like what you go into, you switch, right? Like you,
Yeah.
right? You're paid well, you have a good life, and when we talk about quality of life, like it seems really pretty appealing. Versus you pick something, you go into it, and you hope you pick the right thing in the end, right? Which can be a little worrisome, I guess, in that way. But you're kind of at this point thinking like, this is a path, and maybe I can look at other paths if this path doesn't pan out, but I'm going to go to the learning the most I can about whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
All right. So MCATs are coming around. How'd you feel about studying for those?
I think that it was it was difficult. It was kinda during the pandemic when I was studying for it, so that made it a little easier because I had a little more time in that sense.
Time isn't necessarily a good thing, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But I think another thing that helped me was I had someone who was studying for it at the same time as me, so I think we would really, like, lean on each other to be like, "Oh, like, let's go through these things," and kind of, like,
Mhm,
talk through things a little bit, and I feel like that type of studying was what really worked for me, is, like, kinda making it fun and interactive like that, so that
mhm.
helped more than, like, going through
It's like
flashcards.
having a gym buddy.
Exactly.
But there's more to that, right? Because you're
Mhm,
already identifying yourself as a person who, I guess, likes social interactions as opposed to. So for you, maybe that's the kind of like pairing or studying, that works and keeps you motivated. So you're studying for that. You at this point are, I'm going to say, already applying. You've bought in. That's where you're going. Did you think that this is where you want to stay?
I wanted to, yeah, I did want to.
You
Um
were talking about medical school applications, which is, you don't know. No matter who you are, you don't know like you're going to get in, right? So did you apply like kind of all over the country or?
I kind of didn't apply that many places because I figured my best shots were in
Okay.
Wisconsin. I really wanted to stay,
Hmm.
specifically come here. So I think I only applied to like 8 places. But I actually I took a gap year and that's when I was applying, but I was working full time in a neurology research lab here in Madison. So that's kind of
Okay.
Yeah, the
So
context of
when you were in that, and this is, now it seems like everybody takes a gap year here.
yeah.
Everybody takes a gap year, after everything. Like it is what, but for my age group, we didn't know about those things. Nobody told us about the gap year at all. So what were you doing in the lab? This is during like COVID-ish time,
Yeah,
you said,
it
right?
was, yeah. So we were looking at basically the chronic immune response to stroke, and we were looking at, which immune system players were being increased and if they could be tamped down to basically control inflammation after stroke. So it was very, like, wet lab heavy, a
Mhm.
lot of, like, mice and rats and growing astrocytes on plates, like that kind of.
So you spent a lot of time not around people.
Yeah, yeah. So that was kind of a sad a sad year.
And the reason why I'm saying that is because I had a similar experience in that I worked as a chemist. I used to I work on the digestive studies for like Adderall and stuff like that. So these are controlled substances. So you're sealed off from the world and no windows. Sometimes you're in safes. You come in and you see the same people every day.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I couldn't stand it. So it just wasn't for me. And again, I needed that interpersonal interaction. So I'm just picturing, especially around the COVID times, right? And now you're in these labs and you're playing with petri dishes and
Yeah.
kind of not really feeling it. So you've had this ankling towards, psychology, when you're saying strokes, just a lot of neurology,
Mhm.
brain, right?
Mhm.
And some of that is chemical transmitters and all that other stuff. And the other part of it is psychology. And those are, you say psychology is about the brain, I guess, but it's not, right? Like, I mean, these are very different things. One is like focusing on behavior, and the other one is like hard science,
Mhm.
right? These are kind of two separate things. Was there a particular one that you were more into?
I think I was more interested in the behavioral aspect of things. I think it was really cool to see sometimes how, like, those things were chemically derived. So that's why I
Hmm.
really like the combination of those majors. I feel like honestly it probably was more of a mix of really enjoying like the interplay of those, but I feel like I lean more behavioral, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we end up doing things because they're available.
Mm.
Right. And especially when you're looking to apply to like certain things. Oh, this is available. I could get in and do this. Okay. How many hours is that? This and the other. It's kind of in the area field. It sounds nice and makes sense. This, that, and the other. And then some of it is like truly driven by interest. The problem at that stage is you don't control things enough to create something truly of interest. So you're picking other people's
Yeah, right.
things and just, okay, well, this one maybe lines up the best and it's available. So I feel like for me, this concept of the psychology versus like the whole science, neurotransmitters, it's almost an argument rather than a synergy and a spectrum, because I don't think we're close enough between these two things to, I guess, accurately describe it. So I'm almost insulted when there's like a psychological response or thoughts and this and the other saying like, oh, well, it's too much serotonin over here. That's why.
Yeah.
Like, no, that doesn't explain all of it. And then I'll just, so anyway, so I don't think we're close enough that it feels like a blended conversation. I feel like it's almost like an argument,
Yeah.
it's almost like a nature nurture, but it's not. Anyway, so you're leaning more on the psychology part. You like dealing and talking with people, interacting with people. You certainly don't avoid it.
Mhm.
Given the option, right? So I think that all kind of lines up in a lot of ways, right? You, like everyone else, I'd say 99% of people, you're applying for, this is medical school, right?
Mhm.
Like in the United States, this is a really big deal. It's a really hard thing to do. It's not like you had a bunch of people in your family who had you all prepped for this or
Right.
something either, right?
Yeah.
So, and you get in.
No, I
No,
did not get
okay.
it.
I took a step ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I did not get in the first
Mhm.
time. Yeah, so I think that was really tough because it had been obviously something I'd been working towards for a long time, and I was waitlisted at 2 places, so I was kinda, like, waiting till the last minute, and then I kinda had to reposition and try
Mhm.
and think of, like, what am I gonna do for this next gap year while I guess I thought about, like, do I wanna keep going towards medicine?
Right.
But I think, like, when I thought about everything else, there was nothing else that I wanted to do more, and I felt like it was worth it. My family encouraged me to, like, try and do something else. They were very disheartened by that. So, it was a tough time, but I think it honestly I think it made me more sure that I wanted to do this path and that it's it made me more motivated in a sense.
So you lined everything up here and you basically get punched in the face. But then there's a little dangle because there's like, hey, you're waitlisted in these two places. And so there's this like
Some hope.
weird hope
Yeah.
thing that's going on. You're already, I mean, you're saying it now, but were you saying at that time this next gap year? Because this next gap year kind of implies I'm applying again, right? But there's doubts that are coming externally
Mhm.
and internally you're getting hardened at that time or later on.
I think at that time it was definitely disappointing and it kind of felt like really overwhelming to go through the whole process again, to redo my application again, like but I think that I didn't really feel like I wanted to do anything else. Like I think that's what kept pushing me cuz I felt like it was worth it to keep going and like get past it.
Okay, this is splitting hairs a little bit here,
Uh-huh.
right? But so there's nothing else that you wanted to do more. Does that mean, I guess, you really wanted to do this or everything else looks so bad?
No, I really wanted to do this. Like this really felt like what I wanted to do with my life. So that I think that's why I kept going. Like
What did you do?
so I basically got a job, another full-time job. I moved to Milwaukee to be with my partner at that time because he had actually started medical school. He had applied with me and he had
Great.
gotten in. Yeah, and I was like,
This is-
cool, good for you. Um,
I am super supportive.
so that was also kind of tough, but I was really, really happy for him.
Yeah.
But we were living together at that time. And so I got a job. I was saying I liked the behavioral side, like the psychology
Hmm.
side. So I wanted to explore that a little bit more. So I actually worked as a behavioral therapist for kids with autism in Milwaukee for a year. And that was a really, really good experience too. I feel like I learned a lot of skills that I don't think I would have picked up, like a lot of patience, adaptability, creativity. I think it helped me grow a lot.
How did you choose this? So you're moving to Milwaukee and you're kind of like, okay, I'm going to be here and be supportive. I need to find something to do with myself while I prep myself for the next round of my life. But this isn't like, I don't know, you didn't go to Starbucks and become a barista, right? Like
Yeah.
you obviously had the background in your undergrad major, but that doesn't. There's plenty of people in like neuroscience. They're not walking in talk to autistic kids. Let's put it that way. They don't have that personality, patience, this, that, and the other. Obviously, you were not afraid of that.
Yeah, I think that after spending, a lot of time in the lab, I was really like I wanted to be with people. I was looking for something where I could be with
Hmm.
people all the time. I love kids, so I kind of was, looking along those lines and I saw the job pop up and I thought that it would be a good fit
Meant to
based
be.
on my background. Yeah. And when I was in college, I also did some respite care for kids with disabilities, so I kind of had that background too where I was, I guess, kind of looking in that direction too with
Okay,
that
so it wasn't
experience.
completely off the map for
Yeah.
you. And when you say you love kids, is that anything deeper to that, or it's just like I don't know, I see them and they don't bother me. So
I think that they just I don't know, they're very joyful and I think it's
mm,
really contagious. So it's kind of fun to work with them and I feel like it brings out such a creative side of yourself and like I think when you work with them all day like you can't really be in a bad mood cuz I don't know, you're just like
yeah,
they say the funniest things.
but it's also hard to blame them, right,
Right.
for things they do because
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
kids, right?
They're so innocent.
And no, well, I mean, not everybody has that same reaction. You don't need to understand it or fully describe it. You just know it, right?
Mhm.
Like, I don't dislike kids, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure you know people who will clearly say that. They won't even be embarrassed of it. They'll just, say it. So,
Mhm.
all right. So you're there, and man, this is tough because not only did you not get the straight path that you probably envisioned and wanted, you're also watching someone else walk that path
Yeah.
while you're questioning your being and maybe this is where this is my long-term path. Is it or isn't it? And maybe it's good, right? Because you went through the first gap year and learned what you didn't want to do, and maybe you needed to learn yet again what you also don't want to do because you learned that you want to interact with people.
Mhm.
Now you're interacting with people like as much as you possibly
Yeah.
can,
Yeah.
right? And I take it that's not cutting it either.
I mean, I really liked it, but again, I missed like the science aspect, like I really wanted that blend.
Right, because you're working with them and you're trying to figure out how to do things at a certain level, but it's all behavioral, but you're not getting into the why,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the why is still there, and all along you're kind of prepping yourself. I mean, there's MCAT, of course, but
Hmm.
beyond that, there's, I guess, your job by itself is, great for reapplying.
Yeah.
Are you scribing still?
I was still scribing, so I was driving back to Madison on the
Oh,
weekends and
wow.
scribing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't mention this earlier, but I had started working on a rape crisis hotline too. So I was going back to Madison and they had overnight shifts at Meriter. So I would volunteer on that. And that was like a really incredible experience too.
I don't know what that entails, but it sounds traumatic. I mean,
Yeah.
like, wow, good for you. I mean, people need a voice, and, having a voice that's, I guess, not forced to be there, and, can be understanding and listen is really important. Wow. Yeah, I'm just thinking about like exposures and how it molds you. That's well, I guess the emergency department by itself as a whole is a whole variety of who
Yeah.
knows what's. I know that because my wife tells me anything can come through the door, and it could be pediatric, it can be whatever.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah. So you're doing other stuff, right? You're pretty busy,
Yeah.
right? And we don't need to necessarily get into this, but your partner is going to be busy as well, being like, in medical school. That's right. I'm sorry. I'm just picturing you like watching this. All right. How's it going?
Good. Yeah. So in terms of like,
You're there.
yeah.
You're like, I don't know, a few months into this. You've got some kind of a routine, weekends over there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was going well. I was obviously anxious about the upcoming cycle, but I think that I don't know. I think I learned a lot during the year. So looking back, obviously, it was a good experience. Yeah, it was definitely a stressful year at the time because I was really nervous about reapplying and everything. But I think that I honestly, I don't think I was happy for my partner at that time. And I think I was really excited to see all the stuff they were learning about, hoping that that was going to be me next year. It was a good first look into one year.
Were you, I guess you're more back to kind of right after you get waitlisted. Obviously, there's that hope component. Do you think you had a reaction of um, anger, meaning like they don't know what they missed and I can't believe other people this, or just I'm gonna just be better?
Yeah, I think it was sad. I was really sad, but I think I tried to turn it into, motivation, trying to like use it to spur myself forward instead of
How long did that take?
honestly, I feel like when stuff like that happens, I just try to like make a plan and I think that makes me feel better. So, and it also helps me feel less sad, because I'm not having to dwell on that. I'm just moving, trying to move pieces to move forward. And so I think like after that happened, I just immediately started trying to figure out my next steps. It was sort of a distraction piece, but also it kind of helped.
So when you say like, things like that happen, so has that always been your response?
I think generally, yeah. I feel like I try not to like dwell on things too much and just kind of like
Next step,
try and make
make
a
a
plan.
plan.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. It's better than sitting here in my head. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that. No, I'm glad you went that route. But now you've got another cycle coming up.
Mm.
Are you already thinking ahead with the next plan? Meaning, if this doesn't go through, then I'm done. Or
Yeah, honestly, I hadn't thought a lot about my next plan. I was just trying to like in the second reapplication, I was like hopeful because I had had some meetings with advisors who were like, "Oh, we're not really sure," like I was asking, what are the gaps in my application? How can I improve them? And they were like, we're not really sure like what you need to address, but I think probably the main thing was my GPA being lower,
Mhm.
especially in the beginning of college, but that wasn't really something I could fix with another gap year.
Yeah,
So I think some of the things I was hearing from advisors was that, with the reapplication, like you might have a better chance because like they're seeing that you're committed to this field.
you're
And
committed.
yeah. And so I was kind of hopeful with that too. But I didn't really think about what would happen if I didn't get in again. Honestly, I was kind of like, yeah, just fingers
Yeah.
crossed.
All right. Just so I don't embarrass myself again, you got in the
I
second.
got in. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm here. Yeah.
Because I think that's where we're going. But
Yeah.
don't actually know, right? Clearly
Yes.
I was wrong. So you get in, was it like kind of like 8 schools again, like the region?
Yeah,
Yeah,
pretty
okay.
much, yeah.
Because yeah, after that you might say, "Oh, let me spread a wider, net." And you're like, "Okay, I want to be around here. These are my highest probabilities." But again, you wanted to come here, meaning
Mhm.
like Madison. So obviously, that's where you are now, right? So you're coming into medical school. You've had a journey getting there. Um, how are you feeling before you start?
I was just really excited. Like, I was so excited, I was so ready to start. I think I was a little nervous because I was like, I've been out of school for a little bit, I guess 2 years. So, I'm, like, wondering how easily, like, being back in the classroom and learning will come to me. So, I guess a little apprehensive about that, but honestly just, like, super excited to start.
Yeah. So were you confident in what you bring to medical school?
I think that first application cycle gave me a lot of, like, imposter syndrome coming in, and I think I felt like, like, everyone else is probably smarter than me and better than me, and, like, I am gonna have to work really hard to try and, like, even be close. So I think my confidence was definitely shaken after that.
So you maybe some echoes of my GPA early to send you, but obviously,
Yeah.
like in undergrad, I don't know, like it's different, right? Because nobody's going into medical school the way they were going into like freshman year of college, right? It's
Yeah.
very different thing. Like you're there, and of course, you're like hyper focused on your grades and keeping them up. Walking into your first year of medical school as opposed to your first year of undergrad, which is like, do I have friends? It's a very different thing, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, you're walking into there. I could see you going the other way, meaning like I scribe in an emergency department. Like I've seen more and I've worked with these artistic kids and then the rape crisis. These people haven't done any of this. They're probably afraid of their own shadows. And you may not have appreciated that experience and how
Yeah.
much it was going to help you at that time. But like these are, you're assuming, I don't know if it's true, but these are people who they've never walked in those shoes, and maybe they're got better grades, whatever, better MCAT scores. But I don't know. I mean, medical school is a lot about clinical exposure and interviewing people, and they may have a harder time than you would. At least you've seen people who know how to do it before, meaning like when you were scribing. And it's a level of detail because you're actually listening to the words, right? Like it's not just, I was in the room and I wasn't
Yeah.
paying attention or tuning out or whatever it is,
Mhm.
right? Like you have to be involved. So yeah, I could see that going the other way, but of course, this is a big moment, right? You're walking in there, so you've got some doubts. How did it feel after you started?
I think it felt good. I think a big thing was that I was so interested in the information that I was learning that it came a lot more easily than, like calculus in undergrad. So
Hmm.
I think that was a really welcome change. And I feel like that's the style of learning and the things that we were learning like fit my mind a lot more. So it actually was a lot better in terms of that.
I remember that. I remember walking through steps of life where it was like, high school and undergrad. And I kept saying and thinking, like, when am I just gonna like actually learn the useful stuff?
Yeah.
Right. And I do look back and say, okay, I'm glad I took like Buddhism and Taoism and whatever it is. Now that I'm like 50 years old, I'm looking back and like, oh, it was really useful, right?
Mhm.
But at the time, I was just like, but there is that feeling. It's like, wow, okay. And I think it's hard for people to recognize how much easier it is to learn things you want to learn,
So much easier. Yeah.
right? Because you hear about like, oh, you got to memorize all this, you got to learn all this. It's like, yeah, but you're into it, right?
Mhm.
If you think about, I don't know, social media, and someone asks like, oh, you remember like 3 years ago this person said that, and you remember that. Well, how many times did you hear it? How many times did you study that? Once. Why? Because you were into it,
Mhm.
right? Like it's the same thing. Like, well, it's not the same, but it's similar in medicine where you're like you probably were really curious about like, oh, which neurotransmitter would like decrease that symptom. Well,
Yeah. Now I'm
you're
good.
not going to not remember that. I mean, that's interesting,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
How these interactions are, especially with your background, trying to like put it into frames that you've had before about neurotransmitter movement, da da da. So that sounds like it was okay. So you're in there and you're like this is my stuff. Now, not all of it's going to be your stuff. Some of it's not going to be your stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because it's still, the whole human body and all
Mhm.
these different systems. And there's some aspects of it that people are not going to connect with. behavioral science, right? Some people are going to just absolutely hate that. Other people are gonna love it and be drawn to it, right? So there's medicine's a huge spectrum of different specialties within it too, and different topics. But it sounds like you're you're pleasantly surprised.
Yes. Yeah.
So first year went okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll kind of get into, I guess, where you are now, but before we got there, there's kind of this thought process that kind of every medical student has to start figuring out, right? And it's this big division. It's medical, surgical,
Yep.
right? And then there's direct pathways. So you had anatomy lab again,
Yeah.
right? It was, hey, anatomy. Okay. So you have anatomy lab, and then you have all these other, I guess, surgical exposures. And then now with medical school, I think they're doing like first year, you're starting to do like weird clinical things already, which
Yeah.
is like super early, right? It used to not be till like third year before you did that, which is way too late. But anyway, so in first year, you're starting to get like clinical exposures, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, leans into some of your strong points, which is historically you wouldn't have seen that till third year. So the people who are clinically comfortable or strong, no one would even know they had that till third year. So you can imagine you have 2 years of getting beaten down by everybody else who's like good at calculus, right? Anyway, you see what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So first year, you've got a little bit of clinical exposure. How are you feeling about the big divide, I'll call it?
Honestly, like I I never thought that I would be a surgery person. I didn't even consider it, honestly. And I feel like I had this image in my mind of like surgeons being really like intense, like very type A people, very like, top of the class, like not somebody who, didn't get in the first time. I didn't even like
Hmm.
picture myself in that vein. So I never even considered it initially in medical school. I actually came in thinking that I wanted to do emergency medicine because, especially my scribing experience, I really liked like the breadth of things they were able to treat, how they knew so much about everything.
Hmm.
And I was specifically thinking even like pediatric emergency medicine because of the peds experience I
Sure.
had. So that was kind of the path that I started on. So yeah. And then I was
So this is first year still. You're
first year.
thinking that. Okay.
Yeah. So I was on like the emergency medicine and pediatric interest groups. Like
Hmm.
that was kind of like where I thought I'd be. And then kind of thinking about like the classroom learning, I really liked the GI system. So I was like thinking maybe I want to do GI. So that was actually an interest for a while. And then after first year, you do a Shapiro research project over the summer.
Hmm.
And so I did that in GI because I was thinking that, okay, maybe that's what I want to do.
So, but you're saying certain things, right? So GI, you're talking about surgery, emergency medicine. These are all procedure based
Yes.
specialties, the things that you're mentioning. And, maybe I'm just picking things. They're not medical. Well, emergency medicine is medical, obviously, but there's a lot of procedures and the pace of it is different. It seems like there's commonality to that. And GI obviously is, very procedure based, to
Yeah.
say the least. So was there something to that? I guess, within the procedures that drew you?
Yeah. I think unconsciously, yes, at that time. I think I really liked the ability to be able to like do something physically for the patient
Mhm.
and kind of almost like see the results in real time. And I think it felt like really valuable to be able to like have a skill that you could accomplish something to help a patient. I think the procedural, I guess, interest came from really liking to do things with my hands. Like I was really into art and painting a lot when I was like younger, and especially my gap years, I got more interested in it with the time that I had. So I think unconsciously at that time, that was kind of what was like leading me down a more procedural route.
Yeah, I joke around about this, but I kind of mean it when I because I meet people in the urology clinic. I'm a nephrologist, and then usually I have a urologist with me. We do a disciplinary clinics, and I'll say, yeah, if you have a kidney stone or something, this is somebody who can actually do something about it. I'm just going to talk about it because there's no like procedure that I'm doing. Our procedure is dialysis, so it's a different story. But
Mhm.
but yeah, there's the medical. It's not completely true because you put dialysis catheters, and now we have interventional nephrologists that do all kinds of stuff, or whatever it is. So there's a lot of procedures within medical fields, like cardiologists can do caths and all that kind of stuff. So there's overlap, but the general concept is that if you're in the medicine side of things, that you're not doing as many procedures. And I guess there's some of that instant gratification that's kind of tied to a procedure
Yeah.
and doing that as well too. I think emergency medicine is like, rapidly paced, not like, oh, I hope you get better in 3 months. No, it's either you get worse or you get better. One of the two things is going to happen, a lot quicker. And I think that sometimes helps determine where people fit in better. Like, like my wife and I are like two different paces, right? She's like fast, I'm slow. Right? Everything. Like, you know, so you're there, you're kind of feeling the procedure aspect of things. The whole point is that you get exposure to all these things, right? And so you're going through these rotations, and I don't know how much they've morphed, but historically it's always been like you're doing like 3 months of medicine and you're doing like 3 months of surgery, or is this similar?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
very similar. And we kind of have a lottery where we can pick the order of our rotations. And I picked surgery first because I was like, oh, I can just get it out of the way. They kind of tell
Yeah.
us like, if you do the rotation that you want to do like in life third, then you'll kind of have built up more experience. So you'll be the best for that rotation, either
Hmm.
third or fourth. So I was like having internal med third because I was thinking about, I was going to do GI and then getting surgery over with in the beginning because there was no way I was going to do surgery. So
Right.
that's kind of the mindset I went into it with. And then I like fell in love with my surgery rotation, like totally unexpectedly. And that was very surprising to me, but that kind of informed
So
my path.
falling in love with surgery, more specifically, you're a med student, right? So you're walking in there and it's not like, give me the weapons, right? You're doing a lot of chart review and presenting things and, patients. And then if you get into the OR, you're retracting. I don't even know if they do that anymore. Probably have machines
Yeah,
for
yeah,
all I
no,
know.
no.
Or, at some point, it's going to be all robots or whatever. But I'm just saying. So how do you fall in love with when you're not actually doing it is what I'm
Yeah.
getting at.
Yeah.
Like residents are fighting for a good spot, right? And
Right.
and you're there, right?
Yeah. I think that a lot of it was just like kind of almost witnessing like the miraculous things that were able to happen in the OR and like knowing the anatomy so well and that active like problem solving when you're in the OR, like you're by the end of the case, you're, making someone's pain better or like fixing a problem, taking out a cancer. Like at the end of the case, there's kind of like a result, which was really cool.
Hmm.
And I just feel like to know the body that well, both medically and surgically, to be able to do that with your hands is just it was like so incredible. I had had no exposure to it before that at all.
Right. So this is kind of the big, there's, I guess, more minor procedures, you could say in, GI or doing like a lumbar puncture or draining an abscess or something like that. And then this is like, I'm going to take out a whole organ here.
Right.
Yeah. And this person is going to get better and feel better. And you're going to see them in follow up. Hopefully they're happy. You took out the right organ, right? Okay. But now surgery is also pretty broad
Yes.
by itself,
Yes.
right? And before we get into that, you still had to do the medicine thing, third rotation
Mhm.
as right internal medicine. So you go into like internal medicine now, and how did that feel?
I really liked it too. So I was very torn. I feel like that initial diversion between medicine and surgery, honestly, it was really hard for me to make. I was honestly between general surgery from my first rotation and GI for a majority of medical school until I ended up figuring out. But my internal med rotation, I really, really liked because I liked thinking through the problems and like gathering data and information and like, looking up all these papers and trying to figure out,
Mm.
the diagnosis or like the treatments each day. Like I really liked that problem solving and loved talking to the patients, while they were hospitalized too. Like it was so I was really torn,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah, yeah. So that's unfortunately just like going from high school to undergrad, you have to apply to a major, right?
Yep.
And now you're in a situation where, the clock starts ticking essentially on in like
Yeah.
how do you differentiate, right? And even if you don't fully differentiate, at least medical versus surgical, because unfortunately those are the routes you have to go through to get to wherever you're going. Was there something in there in the following years that really kind of pushed you one way or another before we even get into the sub-surgical fields?
Yeah, I think that while I was on my medicine rotation, I kind of still had a little bit of the itch of like,
Hmm.
the thinking about surgery and like the way that I felt on the rotation and how it was like a little piece that was missing when I was on the medicine rotation. And yeah, so I think it was just always in the back of my mind, like, is GI surgical enough for me to feel fulfilled in like what I want to do? And then my last rotation was family medicine, internal medicine. It was all like outpatient things. And at that point, I was it had been so long since surgery that I had almost, it kind of had taken a back burner a little
Mm.
bit because I had most recently done internal med and gotten all this GI exposure and stuff. And then the family med attendings were having me do procedures in the family med clinic. So I was being able to suture again and things like that. And it kind of like reignited it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I loved this before.
Mhm.
This is such a good reminder of that. So that's when I started thinking more about switching back potentially. And then actually when so this is my last rotation of my third year now. I still don't know what I want to do. And then one of my family med attendings had invited me to see a vasectomy that he was going to be doing in clinic. So I went to that and it kind of sparked the idea of urology. And I did not know anything about the specialty before that moment. Very distinctively, I remember. And so I kind of started researching the specialty and realizing that it had a lot of components of what I liked about different things. And then we had these little gaps where we would have free time. And so I set up like shadowing in between my family med rotation with the urology department because I was in La Crosse at the time, which is one of our away
Yeah.
campuses. And so then I was able to get more of the clinical exposure to urology and see the kind of breadth of things that they do. And that's when I finally figured out what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So right at the end.
Wow. Yeah, that's kind of a whirlwind and it's just meant to be, right? I mean, it kind of puts everything together. When I hear about it or think about it, it's like, yeah, you've got this, obviously you have the procedures. You obviously have a connection with patients, long-term, follow-up as well. You're dealing with very important personal things, right, with patients. So,
Mhm.
you don't have to worry about being, I don't know, superficially involved. And within urology, there's so many different angles
Yeah.
and subspecialties, to think about that can drive you one way or another. I think you had mentioned to me you had an interest in oncology,
Mhm.
right? Which then, of course, brings you back into the medicine and chemotherapy. So those things are all, not running very far away from you. Fortunately, you don't actually have to decide that yet. And, when we first met, like 2 days ago, I heard you had just received some really great news that you had matched neurology at MassGen. And maybe that's a coincidence, maybe not, but congratulations.
Thank you.
You went through this path of, I don't know what's going to happen with my life. I'm taking another gap year. And now you're going to Mass Gen.
Thank you.
Love it.
Yeah.
You deserve it.
Thank you.
Right. And I think it's great that you could share that, so maybe some other people out there who are not having a great time at some part of their life could look
Mhm.
back and say, yeah, sometimes you got to get through the mud. Right.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add or throw in there?
No, I think that's
We went
it.
through it all, right?
Yeah.
You're just like, wow. No, that was great.
Well, thanks for having
Yeah,
me.
that was